lost my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
Join me on Patreon to watch up to 5 episodes of this series and others in advance that are live right now. With that said, enjoy. There was merely one expectation that came from the mind of a soldier of a warrior race: the liberty to fight and do as they pleased. Some others were mere gluttons. Some few combatants preferred to focus on their career path, and others merely desired the bloodshed that came with their work. Everyone just wanted to live on their own terms, and because of this, their expectations were very low, though it wasn't as if the common Saiyan realized such. This was the main reason as to why it was so easy to satisfy them. Give most Saiyans a good fight, fine meals, and a little cot to lay their backs on every now and then, and you're pretty much on their good side. Bardock was like that when he was younger, in the days of which battle was the only thing on his mind. Being a lower-class warrior, he had typically been underestimated and overlooked. Upon realizing that he'd be insanely lucky to have one single person in this world care for him, the scarred Saiyan now knew that he was on his own for the most part, though it didn't make him out to be a total sociopathic sadistic brute like most of his peers. The desire for affection and congeniality was concealed down inside, and he lived by the code of survival of the fittest. Anyone could underestimate his power. Hell, that was the main reason he was put into so many dangerous situations in the first place. Many comrades had fallen from his young age and up, though he never did. By simply using his head and then relying on his intuition, the Saiyan always made it out of what seemed to be near impossible conquests. Bardock lied down on his bed, eyes glued to the dry ceiling that resided above him. For the past hour, he hadn't blinked at all. He stared so intensely that he forced a blurry outline of the single face that he had missed the most. Jean. He missed her so much. Some nights, he felt like crying, but he knew all too well that he'd be punching himself in the face for even just letting himself do something like that. Despite letting himself go soft over the past few years, he'd be damned to ever let tears fall down his hardened face. Kakarot, Raditz. He missed his children too. Many of his own people didn't seem to mature as they got older, save for only in combat, but Bardock did in other areas as well. Despite putting on a hard act, he genuinely cared for Gin, and it showed. Though to suppress what he felt like was a weakness resulted in him not really showing much care for Raditz during his childhood before he became an official combatant. He had just started really talking to the boy, and now all that's spoiled because he's out here, and chances are he won't be seeing his firstborn again until he's a full-grown adult. Really a shitty life Saiyans lived. With all the time he had to think to himself, especially subsequent to self-reflection, it all just made sense. Bardock wanted nothing more but for his kids to make it out there in this cold, merciless world. He couldn't care less of how they turned out, just that they got to live and journey out in a life that they found fulfilling. For Bardock knows that the only thing he had fulfilling was Jean till he lost her. Bardock started to feel his bed beginning to shake, and he knew for a fact that he wasn't doing anything to cause it to move in such an abnormal manner. What the hell? The bare-chested Saiyan removed himself from the bed to see it starting to tremble even more. It wasn't just the bed, though. The entire room in its entirety was trembling. Cracks in the walls started to form due to the insane pressure being built, and before Bardock could get his armor and scouter, the entire ceiling had caved in on him. Surrounding the house that had collapsed, there were dozens of Zune people surrounding the building, rendering hundreds of energy attacks that relentlessly came from all angles. Before he and any of the others could do anything to fight the inevitable, the house had collapsed on all of them. Everyone that had caused this just stopped and looked on with their eyes wide and some even full of fear. They knew what move they were pulling by doing this, and they could only hope that it took care of all the Saiyans. But seeing a hand come up from the ruins and elicited a gasp from all those that looked on. Bardock's face wasn't similar to that of a very happy one. A fool with half a brain would quickly deduce that it was the Zune people who had orchestrated this attack around this time period. The scarred warrior wasn't very surprised, but it didn't mean that he wasn't upset. He invested far more than he needed to, and this is how they repaid him? Go figure. Nappa rose up from the ruins, bruised, scratched, and absolutely livid. The very first Zunian he had placed his eyes on had been attacked and decapitated without mercy. The only thing that the giant soldier wore was his undergarments, and given that he had no time to put on armor, he just went into rage mode. He didn't care for blasting people to bits. No, he wanted blood on his hands. He wanted to feel the skulls he punched being crushed. He wanted the warm, dry blood leaking off his hardened knuckles. He wouldn't be satisfied until he got his revenge for being disturbed and betrayed, all while he was just beginning to sleep. With all the attention now focused on Nappa, Bardock wasn't getting attacked. The Saiyan removed his feet from the rubble, where his pants could be seen tattered by the ankle area. He knew that Zorn was still around here, so he had to look. After a few seconds of tossing debris away behind him, he managed to see a portion of Zorn. By solely looking at his face, he could tell he wasn't in the best of shape. "Zorn!" Bardock called out. "Are you all right?" Unlike Nappa and Bardock, Zorn was sound asleep long before the attack had even taken place. Because of this, he had taken the worst of it. The mid-class soldier rose his shaky hands from below and struggled just to get up. As soon as Bardock saw his bloody arm, he grabbed the Saiyan's hand and aided in bringing him back up on his feet. "Hey, you okay?" Zorn removed his hand from Bardock and winced in pain as he grinded his teeth. "What does it look like?" he mumbled. Zorn felt as if his body was made of literal metal. It pained him to do the purest actions such as breathing. "One of them's down! Kill him!" Bardock spun around sharply, his glare locking onto 5 young trainees standing before him, their hands charged and aimed straight at Zorn, an easy target in his weakened state. The sight made Bardock's jaw tighten in disgust. "So this is how you repay us?" he snarled, spitting at the ground. "We train you, protect you, and this is the thanks we get? Prince Vegeta should have wiped you all out himself and saved us the trouble." Before any of them could react, Bardock's body blurred into motion, a sudden flash of power and rage. His elbow crashed into the jaw of the tallest one with a sickening crack. The man's body spun like a ragdoll before slamming into the ground. Bardock landed lightly, spun on his heel, and fired a concentrated energy blast straight through another man's stomach, vaporizing him in an instant. He pivoted again, using the recoil from his blast to launch forward, his fist connecting with the third trainee's face in a thunderous haymaker that sent him flying through a wall. The final 2 rushed in from behind, shouting in panic, but Bardock had already read them like an open book. With a swift twist, he backhanded both across the face, dropped low, and drove both elbows into their guts simultaneously. The air left their lungs in violent gasps as they doubled over in pain, clutching their stomachs. Bardock straightened slowly, turning to face them as they dropped to their knees. He looked down at the pair with cold, unblinking eyes that had seen far too much betrayal. He wanted to say something, to curse them, to ask why, but words refused to come. The betrayal stung deeper than he'd expected. After all the time he'd spent teaching these weaklings how to fight, how to survive, this was how they repaid him? There was no point in lecturing them now. Without emotion, Bardock grabbed both by the throat and lifted them effortlessly into the air. His grip tightened gradually as their feet kicked helplessly. His face remained blank, his breathing steady, his gaze empty as their eyes rolled back and their bodies went limp. He let go, letting their corpses drop at his feet with dull thuds. Nearby, Zorn, still on one knee, his hand clutching his chest, noticed 2 figures fleeing in the distance. Through blurred vision, he caught sight of them. Chupi and his younger brother, Epu, escaping with something heavy on their backs. Rage burned in his chest like wildfire. Those cowards? They think they can just fly off after stabbing us in the back? Zorn's body screamed in pain, but his fury was louder. With a growl, he pushed off the ground and shot into the air after them, leaving a violent burst of dust in his wake. Bardock turned just in time to see him go. His sharp eyes followed the trail and spotted the two brothers in the distance, one carrying a chest, the other sitting atop it. The realization struck instantly. Damn it, not good. He stepped forward to pursue, but before he could take off, 10 warriors surrounded him. "You die here, Saiyan!" Those words dripped with venom and hate. Bardock could almost taste the bitterness in their voices, and for a moment, he wondered just how much they despised serving under Frieza's command. These weaklings couldn't even handle a year of training without resentment, while Bardock had survived under the monster's rule for decades. But now wasn't the time to think about that. He clenched his fists, smirking faintly as energy began to flicker around his body. He always enjoyed this part, the moment his enemies thought they had him cornered. It was in moments like these that he truly felt alive. He could already imagine the look of shock that would twist their faces when they realized how far out of their league they really were. Still, he needed to make this quick. Zorn was in no shape to fight alone, and Bardock was the only one who could make sure he lived through this. Nappa didn't care about anyone but himself. Bardock's eyes narrowed. "No," he said coldly, his voice steady and full of deadly intent. "I don't." High above the battlefield, Chupi was already pushing his body to its limit. His muscles ached as he flew, carrying two burdens, the heavy wooden chest chained shut on his back, and his little brother, Ipu, sitting atop it. Ipu's heart sank as he looked down, hearing the distant screams of their comrades. The air smelled of smoke and death. "Why can't we go back?" he shouted over the wind. "Because I don't want either of us to die, damn it," Chupi barked, his voice cracking with both anger and fear. "Ipu, we've been over this. No whining, not now." His younger brother fell silent, but Chupi's heart pounded in his chest. He'd never been this terrified before. He knew how fast the Saiyans were, how easily they could catch up if they wanted to. He could only pray the chaos behind them would buy them enough time to escape. "All we have to do is reach the pod," he told himself. "Get off this cursed planet. Find some quiet world where no one knows our names. We'll live free. With all this treasure, we'll never need to fight again." It sounded simple, but deep down, he knew it was a fantasy. The two brothers descended into a barren wasteland, a dead valley filled with cracked earth, dry lakes, and brittle trees. It was quiet, empty, perfect for a getaway. Chupi landed roughly, his boots digging into the dirt, and the heavy chest fell with a loud thud, sending up clouds of dust. "There it is," he said quickly, spotting the small attack pod hidden under debris. "Get in, Ipu." Ipu obeyed without question, climbing into the pod's seat as Chupi rushed to activate the controls. "I changed the destination," he explained hurriedly. "It was set for planet Vegeta, but I switched it to some world far from here. Somewhere no one will find us." He paused, frowning. "At least, I hope." He honestly had no idea where the coordinates would take them. He just wanted to believe in luck, maybe even fate, for once. Ipu looked at the chest beside him. "How will the chest fit in here?" Chupi grunted. "We'll make it fit if we have to." Then a voice cut through the dry air, hoarse, furious, and all too familiar. "None of you will be fitting in anything that takes off on this planet." Chupi froze. His heart skipped 2 beats. That voice. He turned and saw him. Zorn, bloody, limping, his eyes burning with wrath, was standing there, aura flickering like fire around his battered body. The sight made the brothers' blood run cold. "Zorn!" Chupi hissed through clenched teeth, moving to block the pod's entrance. He spread his arms wide, shielding his brother and their only escape route. The Saiyan dragged one leg behind him, gritting his teeth as he approached. His breathing was ragged, his face twisted in pain, but his fury burned hotter than ever. To be attacked while he slept, humiliated and nearly buried alive, it was unforgivable. And now, he was here to make them pay. "Best be assured, you're going to pay for this," Zorn hissed through clenched teeth, his voice deep and venomous. Bardock and Nappa are already tearing your friends limb from limb, but what they're doing to those weaklings will look like child's play compared to what I'm going to do to you, you coward." He stood there, bleeding, shaking, gasping for air. His chest rose and fell with every labored breath, his fractured foot trembling beneath him. His body was battered, his vision blurred, but his pride still burned bright. Chupi's eyes narrowed. Seeing the Saiyan in such poor condition made his confidence swell. His posture straightened, his arms crossed smugly, and a crooked grin crept across his face. "Ha!" he scoffed, curling his lip. "I'd like to see you try." A pulsing vein throbbed on Zorn's temple, the sheer arrogance of this fool. Even weakened, the Saiyan spirit refused to break. He would rather die fighting than bow to some sniveling traitor. "You die here!" Zorn roared. He thrust his palm forward, unleashing a glowing violet energy sphere that ripped through the air like a comet. The blast screamed toward Chupi with devastating speed, but Chupi merely slapped it aside with the back of his hand. The energy ball exploded harmlessly into the dirt behind him. Dust and sparks filled the air. Zorn froze in disbelief, and even Ipu's young eyes widened in shock. For Chupi, that moment changed everything. The fear that had once gripped him was gone, replaced by pure, arrogant confidence. His breathing slowed, his grin widened. "That all you got?" he shouted. Zorn growled, teeth bared, and launched himself forward with a burst of raw ki. The air cracked around him as he shot off his back foot. Chupi met him head on. "BAM!" Zorn's head snapped sideways, blood spraying from his mouth as Chupi's fist crashed against his face. The impact sent the Saiyan flying backward through the air. Chupi didn't hesitate. He pursued instantly, closing the distance and slamming another punch into Zorn's jaw, followed by 2 crushing blows to the stomach. Zorn grunted in agony, each strike sending shockwaves of pain through his ribs. Still, he refused to fall silent. His pride screamed louder than his wounds. He was a Saiyan warrior, a soldier of the king's army. He would never beg, never yield, never stop fighting until his last breath. He swung wildly, trying to catch Chupi with a backhand, but Chupi was faster. He vanished and reappeared behind him, driving his knee straight into Zorn's spine. A sickening crack rang out. Zorn dropped to one knee, his face twisted in agony as he clutched his back. His mouth opened in a silent cry. Chupi grabbed him by the hair, yanked his head up, and slammed his face into the dirt with brutal force. "How's it feel?" Chupi snarled, his voice cracking with rage. "How's it feel to be on the other side of the moon, huh?" He dragged Zorn's face across the ground as he flew, grinding rock and dirt into the Saiyan's skin. Ipu's eyes widened in horror as his brother pulled Zorn closer, then flung him violently away. Chupi darted forward and struck again, his elbow crashing into Zorn's back like a blade of steel. Zorn's scream tore through the air, echoing for miles, shaking the clouds above. His body plummeted like a meteor, smashing into the ground below with an explosive crash, leaving a massive crater in the wasteland. Chupi came down right after him, both feet stomping into Zorn's back, crushing him deeper into the dirt. "How does it feel, huh?" Chupi shouted, stomping again and again. "To be belittled? Humiliated in front of your own kind? Treated like a worthless speck in the wind with no direction?" He kicked Zorn over, flipping the battered Saiyan onto his back. Spit flew from Chupi's lips as he screamed, his voice raw with fury. "You Saiyans and your righteous act, you call yourselves the strongest, the best warriors." He grabbed a fistful of Zorn's blood-soaked hair and lifted his head so their eyes met. "So tell me something," Chupi snarled, his face inches away. "If you're so mighty, then why did your prince come crawling here, begging us to pledge allegiance to Frieza?" His voice cracked as he yelled, his eyes burning with hatred. "From what I saw, Frieza isn't one of you. He's above you, something greater than your pathetic race. You're just slaves pretending to be kings. You look down on us to hide your own weakness." With that, he slammed Zorn's head into the ground so hard it shook the earth. How dare you try to turn us into you? We'll never be like you. At least we have the courage to stand up for ourselves even when we're kicked down again and again. You Saiyans don't even have the guts to do that." A calm but sharp voice cut through the rage-filled air. "Coming from the guy who just tried to run away," Bardock's voice echoed from afar. Chupi froze. Zorn turned his head slightly, his half-closed eyes focusing on the new arrival. Even Ipu gasped, his small voice trembling. Chupi grit his teeth, furious that he'd allowed himself to be distracted long enough for Bardock to appear. "We ran to live another day. To fight again in the future," he shouted back. Bardock smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Heh, sure. Keep telling yourself that he took a few slow steps closer, his boots crunching against the dirt. But you know what? You're not wrong about one thing. We are slaves. And maybe we are too cowardly to rise up against Frieza. But we're not stupid. We know when a fight's unwinnable." His expression darkened, voice dropping to a low growl. "You think we don't know what it's like to be treated like trash? Every time Frieza visits, he destroys what we've built, kills our own men just to remind us who's in charge. He keeps us scared, obedient, the same way he did to your people when he came to your world." Chupi hesitated, his breath catching. The truth of Bardock's words hit harder than any punch. Shame flickered in his eyes, though his pride wouldn't let him show it. "Why should I listen to you?" he spat. "You're still one of them, a Saiyan." Bardock gave a slow, mocking frown. "And out of all my kind, who was the one who treated you with respect? Who made sure your little brother didn't get beaten to a pulp when no one else cared?" His eyes sharpened. "I had your best interests at heart, even when we were all stuck in the same sinking ship together." He folded his arms, shaking his head. "But I guess your rage blinds you too much to see that." Suddenly, a loud banging echoed from the attack pod nearby. The small voice of Ipu came through, muffled but desperate. "Don't! Mr. Bardock is good. Please don't fight anymore." Bardock tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but piercing. "So what's it gonna be, Chupi?" he asked. "You gonna listen to your little brother, or ignore him like everyone else you've lost?" Chupi stood frozen, his whole body trembling in a way that made his anger obvious. It didn't matter that Bardock had helped them in small ways. Chupi still saw him as part of something worse. Someone who had let bad things happen. He could see the good in Bardock, he really could, but that didn't mean he had to like him. "Fine," Chupi said at last, the word flat and heavy. Bardock's mouth curled into an easy smile. He turned and walked toward the attack pod, and Chupi followed, stiff and cautious. They stopped in front of the hatch. Bardock opened it, and the little boy Ipu, who had been waiting, ran up and wrapped both of them in a hug. "Thank you, Mr. Bardock," the boy chirped. Chupi felt something in his chest loosen, and he hid a smile. "I thought you were mad at us a few minutes ago, you little twerp," he said, scoffing, but softer than before. Ipu hopped back down, giggling. "Yeah, but I thought you two were gonna fight." "I told you Mr. Bardock isn't a bad guy." "You're really going to just let us walk away like this?" Chupi asked, the edge returning to his voice. Bardock nodded. He didn't see any point in making their lives worse, just to prove a point. Being cruel for cruelty's sake wasn't him. He'd rather see people do better than be dragged down. "There will be no gain in me stopping you," he said calmly. "If I set you free, something good can come from that for you and your brother." Hearing it was one thing. Seeing Bardock say it without any hint of menace was another. Chupi looked at him and felt something shift. "I guess you're not all bad, Bardock." He held out his hand. "This might be the only Saiyan hand I ever shake," he thought. Bardock reached out as well, trying to make peace. He expected a firm grip, the kind of handshake that matched the hard edge of a warrior. Instead, he found something soft and slack, nothing like what he'd pictured. When he met Chupi's eyes, he saw only white. Chupi's mouth hung open, and a thin stream of blood trickled from a hole in the center of his forehead, wetting his tongue. "Kick!" he gasped. "Chupi!" Ipu screamed. Bardock's attention snapped to Zorn. He had forgotten the other Saiyan for a moment, but now he saw him, barely upright, breathing hard, furious. "But bastards!" Zorn spat, voice ragged. Bardock had just been promoted and sent on his first mission as a mid-class warrior. And this was how it turned out. "Bardock, you traitor!" Bardock's eyes went narrow, a thin, hard line. He'd given Chupi a chance to live, and now this? He kept his face calm, letting his eyes do the talking. Zorn stumbled, limping like a fighter on his last legs. The upper-class Saiyan kept his glare locked on Bardock, as if his stare could somehow make Bardock suffer. Ipu was on his knees, shaking his brother, his small shoulders trembling with grief. "Chupi, wake up!" The boy sobbed, tears tracking down his cheeks. "Wake up!" Zorn snarled through his teeth. "When Nappa gets here, he'll kill you, Bardock. You and your little friend, we're taking that treasure back to the king. You'll be buried with this barren world," he sneered. "Or better yet, I'll have Nappa turn you in for treachery. We'll bring you to the king, and he'll make an example out of you." Heh. Bardock's anger tightened inside him, but he forced his voice to stay low and steady. "Wrong. When Nappa arrives, you'll be dead." Zorn's soft chuckle died off. He stared at Bardock, stunned and furious. Could Bardock really mean that? He forced himself to listen as Bardock continued. "He'll ask what happened, and I'll tell him the truth, or most of it. You were weak. By the time I arrived, you were dead. I killed the murderer, but the other survived. That's the story, and you won't live to see me tell it." The words hit Zorn like a blow. His blood pressure shot up, an eye vessel popped. He was already seeing red, but now his eyes glowed deeper with rage. "You dare!" he howled. Bardock only nodded. "I do." He kept his tone calm, almost casual. That only fed Zorn's fury, and Bardock knew it. Zorn lunged, each step dragged at his broken back and battered foot, but he poured his anger into every move, hoping that sheer hate would be the thing to kill Bardock. Before Zorn closed the distance, Bardock shoved Ipu aside with his foot. He dodged Zorn's wild punches with small, clean movements, tilting his head, slipping left and right, never wasting energy. He stepped back in measured beats, planting his feet like a dancer, making Zorn look clumsy and exposed. Zorn's right foot landed wrong, and he groaned in pain, forced to pause. Bardock didn't hesitate. He drove a knee into Zorn's gut, then followed with a crushing elbow to the back. Bardock lifted his foot and held it above Zorn's head for a heartbeat, slowing the scene like a narrator drawing out a line. He glanced at Ipu, who watched with wide, terrified eyes. "This is for your brother," Bardock said softly. Then the foot dropped. SPLAT. Blood sprayed, and Bardock's boot came away smeared with the dark wetness from Zorn's ears. Little bits of bone and skull clung to the sole, grisly, real, and absolutely final. Ipu couldn't move. He was frozen by fear. Bardock knew the boy couldn't stay. Not in that place. Not with the memory of what had just happened. The world would be a frightening place without Chupi to guide him. It would be up to Ipu to learn how to stand on his own. Sometimes, Bardock thought, the weak find strength when they have no other choice. "Chupi," Ipu sniffed, clinging to his brother's motionless body. It seemed impossible that someone could be here one moment and gone the next. Since he was a baby, Ipu had had Chupi. He barely remembered their parents. They had died young, too soon. Chupi had been everything. Brother, protector, parent, friend. Chupi was his world. Bardock stood there in silence, watching the small boy cry beside his fallen brother. It struck a deep chord in him, one that hadn't stopped aching since Gein's death. He had been in this kid's shoes not even half a year ago. The pain of losing someone you loved. It hollowed you out in ways no battle ever could. Since losing Gein, the scarred warrior hadn't gone on a single conquest mission. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't see the point. It gave him too much time to think. Too much time to remember. He'd wiped out entire civilizations across the galaxy, leaving worlds in flames, oceans boiling, and skies filled with ash. He used to fight with a grin, not out of cruelty, but because the fight itself was his lifeblood. The rush, the power, the instinct. He never once thought about what those people felt before their worlds burned. But after Jean, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The way his heart twisted when he lost her, that unbearable emptiness. It made him realize just how much pain he had caused others. If losing one person hurt this much, what did it mean for the millions whose lives he had ended? The ripple of one loss could last years, but the pain of countless deaths? That would never fade. There's just no coming back from that. Bardock exhaled slowly and crouched down until he was eye level with the boy. He hesitated, feeling awkward, out of place. Comforting others wasn't something Saiyan warriors were known for. Still, he rested his hands gently on the boy's trembling shoulders. "Ipu," Bardock said firmly. The boy sniffled, his tears falling fast. Bardock needed to do this quickly. Nappa could find him any moment. "Listen to me." But Ipu couldn't stop crying. His chest heaved with grief. Bardock's jaw clenched. He didn't want to yell at the kid, but he had no choice. "Ipu, listen to me. If you want to live, you'll stop crying right now and get back on your feet." He stood up sharply and barked the command, voice cutting through the air. "Get up." Startled, Ipu froze. Then, with small shaky steps, he rose to his feet. He wiped his soaked face, still trembling but quiet now. He looked up at Bardock, the only person left he could trust. Bardock nodded slightly, his tone softening. "I'm setting the ship's coordinates to a peaceful world. No war, no Saiyans. You'll be safe there. The treasure here will keep you alive for a long time." He paused, locking eyes with the boy. "Trust no one who's too kind. Be smart. Be careful. If someone truly needs help, help them. But don't lose your path. You understand?" Ipu nodded, his lips trembling, eyes red from crying. "Good." Bardock turned to Zorn's lifeless body lying nearby. His tattered pants caught Bardock's attention, and an idea sparked. He knelt and began stripping Zorn's body, using the torn fabric as makeshift sacks. He filled them with the shimmering jewels and gold from the treasure chest, packing them tightly until the cloth bulged. It was crude, but it would do. After setting the ship's coordinates, Bardock lifted the heavy sack of treasure and carried it to the pod. He helped Ipu climb inside and placed the treasure carefully on his lap. "Whatever you do, survive," Bardock said quietly, his voice rough but sincere. "I don't care how, just live. Look out for yourself, kid. That's what your brother would have wanted." The door to the pod began to close with a soft hiss. Ipu pressed his palms against the glass, his small face pressed forward as tears spilled down once more. His breathing was ragged, his shoulders shaking. The pod began to tremble, then lift off the ground with a deep rumble. Neither Bardock nor Ipu looked away. Their eyes locked, one filled with grief and fear, the other with regret and resolve. PZSHOOM. The pod blasted off, a streak of light cutting through the air, soaring into the sky until it vanished among the stars. Bardock's hair blew wildly in the gust from the launch, but his expression didn't change. He'd hoped to save 2 lives today. Saving one would have to be enough. Maybe Ipu was right. Maybe Bardock wasn't completely bad after all. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd done too much, gone too far. Whatever good was left in him only appeared in moments like this. Brief, rare, but meaningful. He looked up at the star-filled sky and murmured, "Good luck out there, kid." And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.